I use, writing pads. I use AI. I use different things to help me out. And I grasped onto this new technology, and somebody sat down and they said the only reason why we use technology is it eliminates the mundane tasks. And I sat there and I really thought about it. I was like, when you go back and people used to do handwritten things and you used to have to save the carbon copies, your grandpa did that, and you used to sit there and you have to walk over to the copy machine and make copies of everything. And it kept evolving and evolving. Is the mundane tasks are, we have people who do data entry and there's human error. And if you can sit there, and then there's people who, I get fatigued, you get fatigued, we forget to ask the questions to our customers. What else do you need? I understand you're using a skid steer. Do you need to buy any eco fencing or any erosion fencing to go with that? Do you need any other products? Do you want a smooth bucket or a tooth bucket? And the person forgets to do it, and rather than say, I forgot to ask, is it a smooth or a tooth bucket? The person on the counter just puts tooth bucket. And then the customer calls up and it wastes time. And just like you said, Jeff, the second we start wasting time, you can't charge a customer because we put the wrong bucket on it.
Right.
We didn't ask.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we're losing those margins, and the industry is getting tighter and tighter and tighter because of the, increased equipment costs, increased interest rates. All those things are attacking our margins. If we're not using technology to try and find those margins, our inefficiencies are cutting into our money. And it's funny because everyone says, like we discussed, I don't want to spend the money. And I don't want to spend the money because I don't have it. Truth is can you afford not to have it?
Right.
Because otherwise you're losing these little pieces of money here and there, and it's costing you $100,000 a year without capturing those photos.
And you don't know it's costing you that.
No, because it's doing it a nickel at a time.
Yeah, and it's, we'll just replace that.
We'll just replace it.
On there.
And you get to the end of the year, and what nobody says is I wasted $100,000 because I didn't spend $50,000 to have the great website. I'll never know what person I didn't get.
Yeah.
I didn't have that piece of technology that showed me images, and I lost that $500 repair.
Right.
And so it nickel and dimes your business, and you get to the end of the year and you're like, what technology could I have embraced to elevate my business and capture better margins and be more efficient?
So that actually happened to me personally. And it's something that I think we all make the mistake of. I would consider myself a little bit of a technologist. I love tech. I like doing the new thing. And I came kicking and screaming to Smart Equip. And I'm not necessarily trying to advertise for them or anything like that, but I did a study with them. It was published by Rental Management Magazine a few years ago, and the return on investment was stupid. And I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
The original return on investment when we did the study was over 1,000%. And it was unbelievable, unbelievable. And we brought it back down to like 700% because that was more believable. And I actually talked to a sales rep of theirs recently, and he was telling me that they tell customers 30%, even though they know everybody gets over 300%, because it's more believable. And there's a number of reasons that we could go into another day on why that was more efficient and how we went from 60 minutes to ordering a part to 6 minutes to ordering a part. But I think the big thing there, and the mistake that's so easy for us to make, and I made myself there, is I know if I go buy another mini excavator, I'm going to get a 50 to 70% return on investment. It's super easy. I'm just going to go buy another mini excavator.
That's right.
When I go buy a piece of software or spend time implementing it or train on it or try a new tool, there's switching costs, there's time, there's confusion. And I don't, that end result is so squishy. Like, what's the real value of having more equipment up to rent? What's the real value of having that mechanic that doesn't have to search through 70 different manuals or get their list of passwords out to figure out the right password for the vendor to order the piece of equipment? That's so hard to quantify. And I thought I was a good person at quantifying that. And I did a terrible job of doing it. But I knew I could go buy another excavator and get a 50 to 70% return on investment. So I'm just going to go buy another excavator.
Meanwhile, all these inefficiencies are happening behind the scenes constantly, and you should have fixed that.
Yeah.
Really.
How do you think about that? How do you solve for that?
I don't know how to solve for that exactly. I feel like as an industry, we're really not good at measuring our use of human resources. I mean, I'm going to open a branch. I'm going to have one guy that does this, two guys that do this, one guy that's going to be my staff. Does it have to be that way? Is that really the most efficient way to set it up? We don't know. We just always have done it that way.
Yeah.
And I just think, and then we forget about it. There's any inefficiency that's happening at the branch is trickling through to your back office. Okay, so if you are ordering parts wrong and you're having to do returns, there's a trail of human resources behind that. I mean, we were onboarding somebody new in our office with accounts payable, and I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, how much are we paying this person to fix this $4 purchase order that was done? You know what I mean?
Oh my God, yes.
Like I can't even just throw it out at this point.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And so all the inefficiencies on the front are going to trickle all the way through the company. Maybe you don't need 4 bookkeeping people on staff, but you do because we keep ordering the wrong part and we keep closing the thing wrong. We have to keep returning things.
It's fascinating. Like I was embarrassed at how complicated a process like ordering a part actually was.
It is
because
crazy.
if you had asked me how difficult it was, I'd have been like, it's like 3 steps. You go like you figure out what the part is. The mechanic calls or goes to the website, orders the part ship, it's paid for. Like no big. Okay, maybe that's 4 steps, right? It was 30 steps. The average part order, because they had to get to the right website. They had to compare it to the aftermarket supplier. They had to potentially get an approval. They had to have the part come in, and then they had to have the purchase order paired with the shipping form. Like it was just so complicated,
right.
and I had really no idea how much time that was wasting. Another place that I think that is interesting in that space of wasting time is electrification. And I'm not saying necessarily the sustainability aspects of it or anything like that, but I think about efficiency, right? So an electric piece of equipment, what is the hardest staff member to find right now in an equipment rental store?
Your mechanics.
A mechanic, right?
Yeah, hands down.
And every time you buy an electrified piece of equipment, you simplify your maintenance.
Yep.
For the most part, it either works or it doesn't, especially if it's relatively new during its first 5 to 7 year life cycle. It either works or it doesn't. So every time I buy an electrified piece of equipment, I am cutting down on the time that it takes of the hardest thing that I can get. I can buy electrified equipment. I can't hardly buy more mechanics.
Right.
Like, you know, so it's a lever that I can pull. And then you add on to that efficiencies with the customer. You know, I am sure we have all seen somebody try and start a gas-powered chainsaw.
Right.
A novice. It's terrifying,
Yeah.
right?
Are you at my house?
Yes, yeah. An electrified chainsaw,
Chainsaw.
you just press the button, right?
Yep.
So now you have, when you buy that electrified item, you have simplified your repair process. You have simplified your customer experience. You've maybe even increased safety. Now, I'm not saying that the technology is there and we should replace everything with electrified stuff, especially when we start talking about larger equipment. But I think that there's a place for rental companies to be thinking about that kind of stuff from a different perspective. If I can pay 10, 20, 30% more for an electrified piece of equipment, but I can save 10 minutes of mechanic time, I'm all about it.
Well, you're going to save 10 minutes of mechanic time on every rental.
Yeah.
It's a huge multiplier. Yeah. Okay. I'm a big believer that is going to over time fundamentally change.
That's an element I hadn't even thought of. Like I sat and I thought, you know, I mean, they did the big push of let's save the environment. So you go with electrified units and that's been the big push, but you're exactly right. I fiddled around with my chainsaw. You know, you had to get it started. You had to do the choke. You had to do all this stuff just to start a dang chainsaw where I walk over and I grab my battery-powered drill or I have a battery-powered hedge trimmer, and you're right, clip on the battery and push go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's and like you said, it either works or it doesn't, because mine started having a little dig, swap the battery out, I'm good to go. But if it doesn't work, I told my wife, which I was looking at before we started, I'm just going to go buy all brand new electric chainsaw. I'm going to buy an electric hedge trimmer. I'm going to buy an electric edger, because of exactly what you said.
At the consumer level,
I haven't thought of.
At the consumer level, there's no reason for any of the stuff that you're using around your house to not be electric at this point.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to be dealing and fiddling with the gas power. But I'll tell you where the light bulb went off for me was many years ago, 10 or more. Nissan Leaf came out with their Leaf, right? And they brought them to Atlantic Station in Atlanta, a mall, and we're giving people test drives. And this was before any of the other electrification. I said, well, that's pretty neat. Let me go do it. So I went over there, did the test drive with the person. And the guy's sitting in my seat, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty neat. And he goes, well, here's what you got to understand. This car has 90% less parts than a normal car. And I just went, oh, that's the value. That's the value.
Yeah, you have that aha moment.
Yep, I did.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hasn't made it fully into our industry yet, though.
So you made the statement of fundamentally change the industry. That's a big statement. Any more thoughts on that?
We become more and more of a technology industry and less of a mechanicking industry. You're going to need people on staff that understand the electronics of it, but with those electronics, going to come lots of different options that really aren't there with a mechanical piece of equipment, right? Imagine you can have a chainsaw that you can set a safety speed on, or you can down power the machine if it's with somebody that maybe shouldn't have the full power.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can charge you a little bit less, give you a little bit of a better price, but I'm also the delivery machine that's a little bit down on power because I programmed it that way. All right, that's saving me recharge cycle time costs on the other side of the equation. Okay, so it's a fundamentally different way to think about the business. I've been preaching in our organization that all companies I was saying this 15 years ago, but all companies over the next 10, 20, 30 years are going to be technology companies first. Every company you launch is going to start on a technology foundation of some point. No such thing as opening just a retail shop. What's my technology foundation? Okay, now I'm going to go from there. And so I think I think this will be a different industry when we're.
I'm going to come up with the complete opposite of this because I was just sitting here and I'm thinking exactly what you said, but I'm going to argue with you for fun.
Okay.
So here's what we've got is that every one of us has heard about somebody needs a new battery for their Tesla car. And they go down and it's $27,000. Right. And the person's like, it's cheaper to just get a brand new car. Now, 71 years in the industry, Josh is an expert as well. There is a huge part of your business. You buy a piece of equipment. It has approximately a 5 to 6 year life cycle. And then you sell it and you plan on that money to help offset your costs. But if the battery life on one of those machines is 5 to 6 years, you got to replace the battery, which you may be dipping into the margins you rely on. Is this?
That's a very, very good point. Okay, because if the battery cost is 20% of the machine, you have and the battery is depleted at sale, you don't have a machine. You don't have that. I mean, the model is 5 to 7 years, get 20% back off the back end of it. Right?
That's right.
We just keep rolling. That's the model. But if I have to put 20% into the machine to make it actually turn on in order to sell to somebody, there's no value. But maybe I don't need to sell that equipment in 5 to 7 years.
Right. Or it's something we already deal with. We have battery-powered forklifts. We have battery-powered scissor lifts. Battery power is not new to us. And we have equipment in the industry that even if it's only 12 months old, like think a trench roller, remote control trench roller, it's worth nothing after 12 months. Or the same amount after 7 years. It's still worth nothing. So the pricing model might have to adapt.
There we go.
The maintenance model might have to adapt for it. But I think the other thing that we get as a benefit of this is I'm not saying do it on skid steers or mini excavators yet. I'm saying do it on small equipment. Let the Teslas of the world figure out how to deal with those battery problems, improve the technology, because it's improving so quickly. Let them solve those problems, and then we'll adopt whatever it is that they have solved. Because battery's not new to us. We just need to figure out how to price for that. And if it saves us mechanic time, we can't buy more mechanic time.
Maybe the way you price for that, is through a kind of a recovery type fee. Where, look, I'm bringing you the chainsaw full of power. Obviously, I can't give the power away, so there must be some sort of a fee associated with that, just like a fuel charge.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're keeping that properly on your books, maybe that's your return at the end, is that I'm getting a little bit of percent every single time someone rinses because it's going to go to zero because of the battery problem.
Yeah.
But it's your damage waiver. It's
there you go. Good thinking.
Yeah, I think there's ways to solve for this. So on a related thing, I'm going to share some data that keeps me up at night. That I've always been a little bit uncomfortable sharing, especially publicly, because it's a little bit terrifying to me. We did a study of contractors, just the average contractor, over the last few years, and we asked them a ton of different questions. One of the questions that we have been asking them over a number of years is, where do you most frequently rent? And the thing that terrifies me is over the last 3 surveys, we have seen the local rental store fall off of a cliff. It went from 25% to 18% to 11%.
That's amazing.
It's a huge drop. And it's statistically significant. Now, where they're going, we can argue about. The industry is not getting smaller. There aren't less local rental stores. Now, maybe some of the larger rental companies are taking up a large amount of the revenues, and maybe this slanted toward larger contractors, but we tried not to do that. What I think it is, and this is the part that I want to discuss, it's the stuff that we're talking about right now. When on the same surveys, what we see is that all the contractors want to use websites more. Their first visit to a rental store went from 16% on a website to 25%. In person went from 64 to 47%. Phone went from 20% to 11%. They're using email more, mobile apps more, text messages more, to your point. And then when you look at what they want in a rental experience, over 50% want to find the tools online. Almost 50% want to schedule deliveries. Almost 50% want their quote online. 30% want to complete their rental contract. They want to pay their invoice. Like, they want to do so much of this digitally. And I don't know that we're investing enough digitally. I think that they still like the local rental store, but if we make it too hard to do business with us, if we can't order it online, we can't find it online, we can't pay for it online, maybe the first time rental they have to come in. I'm not saying that that's the biggest roadblock, but if we're not making that easy, doesn't have to be quite an Amazon experience, but if we're not making that easier, are we going to lose it? And I think in a direct sales environment for some of the larger companies, you can kind of get away with it, but you also have bigger budgets for technology. I'm looking at you, Jeff, because you deal with small contractors and you deal with DIY, just like our average member. Now, you've got more locations than the average member, so you see it from a higher level, but you're going after those customers. How do we survive that? Can we claw some of that back, and what are you doing to do that?
I saw those numbers. You had shared them with us, and I mean, it's pretty scary, to be honest with you. What are we trying to do? Well, we are trying to present them with this option, okay? I mean, I've probably launched 6 websites over the past 20 years because every couple of years they just get old and you just got to update it. You got to stay up with expectations. One of the things that's the biggest challenge for independents like myself is we are so beholden to our ERP provider, our vendor of who writes our rental contracts, right? So whatever platform you're on,
yep.
I have, a system installed that we run the whole company on, whether it's orders, purchase orders, work orders, the whole thing, right? I can't edit that software. I can't force them to make changes that I think would be helpful. I can't integrate ChatGPT into it unless they decide to do it. So where really gets very, very tricky, that your platform choice as a rental company is going to matter a lot in the next few years, so that you can access that technology. The large rental companies, they already own their software. They've got, hordes of computer programmers who can, set it up the way they want it set up.
I will tell you that I spent some time with a rental company, similar in that mid-sized group that you're in, and he made the decision and made the investment, and it is a lofty investment, to go in and rewrite the software.
Wow.
And, he took a big national piece of software that a lot of the companies use, and it's not a rental piece of software by no means. And they went in and they rewrote all their own code and made it where their people can put in orders on it. They can put in service. They can put in all that. And I was blown away. And he's like, we had to spend the money to do it. And it kind of worked my mind because just like you said, most companies can't do that. Yeah. And I watched him do it to the tune of millions.
Well, and beyond just, do I have the money to do it? Do I have the vision for it? How do you do it?
Yeah.
Do you hire a program? Like, I wouldn't know how to build a whole system from the ground. I wouldn't even know who you hire to do it.
He has a 6-person staff that does it. I'm like, do you know what that guy is?
That's a different business you're running inside your business.
It is completely different.
So here's the pushback that I would have on that, though. I've worked in rental software. And one of the things that I have seen in rental software is that most companies, and we were even talking about this morning, Elliot, most companies don't even fully utilize the software that they pay for. And then beyond that, they expect it to solve all the world's problems, but they want to pay peanuts for it.
Yeah, that's right.
The second part may be a different issue, but the first part, if you're not even using 80% of the capabilities of the software that you have, then you got to stop complaining and do that. Now, I know from seeing how you utilize your business and you utilize your software that you're actually one of those adopters that go through and utilize the software to its fullest and then could do more. So I guess I would ask you, because I think the first step is to get more people doing at least where you're at so that then they're all aligned and asking for that next thing. What do you do differently or what do you think about that allows you to do things? Like I know you went through and on your inspection app, you went through and took the time and dedicated a person for every single category to put out everything they needed to do in the inspection app by category. Like, what do you think about differently, you think, than other people that they should be doing in their software?
You mean users?
Users,
How
yeah.
people should be? Okay. So when we went to the current platform that we're on, which is a much more expansive platform than we had been on before, I immediately looked at this and went, I've always been the guy that knew the whole thing, right? I knew every inch of the software. And I just realized, look, on the platform that we moved to, like, there's no one person in this organization that's going to be an expert at everything that this thing can do. So we start breaking it out into pieces, okay? You brought up our inspection piece, right? So I assigned 2 guys in our company, 2 branch managers, and then I let go and I trusted them to go through, and they just worked together building all the templates out, and then we kept a feedback loop. So if somebody sees a step that should be added to it, they can flow it through to these 2 guys. They have the codes and the authority to go in and make the changes. So you've gotta let others in your organization have the ability to have an impact on that system. It's not going to be just you as the owner holding every card. Okay, you've got to have some trust.
That's right.
And one other thing I've talked about in the past, I think I talked about a couple of years ago, the future of rental, is that if you own a rental company and you don't like technology, it's not your thing. It's okay.
Yeah.
Find someone younger in the organization and let them go to town with it.
That's
okay,
right.
And you've got to be able to trust it. So to get the most out of that system, I think, is letting a little bit of control go from the ownership level and trusting some people in your organization and assigning them pieces of it to enhance.
I think that's a brilliant comment. I think you're exactly right. We don't necessarily, we have to be willing to relinquish the reins.
Right.
Yeah. And your grandfather, as he turned over the business to you and your brother, he had to see, what, for this business to evolve, you have to give it to somebody who has a new vision, a new idea, and is willing to embrace these new technologies and the new way of business.
Well, I can assure you that was the very first time he let go of anything. Our organization was him and everybody else.
There we go.
Perfectly flat organization.
There we go.
One recommendation that I would have for all rental companies first of all, you should have a modern rental software. If you're operating on an Excel spreadsheet, you're making a huge mistake.
Oh, yeah.
But beyond that, if you're using a modern rental software, you should be calling that rental software company at least once a year and then paying them to train your people on how to utilize it better.
That's the right
They
answer.
know the best practices. They know what the top companies are doing, and you are missing out on some amazing value. And you need to pay for it because you're going to ask for their time. This isn't a free thing.
Yep.
You need to pay them once a year. It doesn't have to be in person. Pay them once a year to say, here's the new features to implement, or here's the things that you're not using as well as you could. There's always going to be workarounds. But man, there's so much in there that I would get a call and somebody be like, well, you should do this or add this or implement this. And it was like, what's right here?
Right.
We've already got it. You just didn't know it was there. And that happens so much in all rental software that I would really recommend you do that. But something that's not in any rental software yet, at least not fully, that I would love to see is dynamic pricing. Like,
Explain that to everybody. I know you.
Yeah,
know what it
I'm
is,
about to.
Yeah.
Elliot and I flew in to Atlanta last night on an airline. And what happens on an airline? Like, you're checking the price when you're buying the tickets, and different places are different prices and different times. And if I buy it now versus buy it later, if I make a change, if I do it last minute, hotels, car rental. rental is already dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing works incredibly well in supply and demand driven environments. If the demand increases and supply decreases, the price should change.
That's right.
If it's the first cold day in fall and everybody wants to rent the log splitter on Saturday, log splitter should be more expensive that Saturday. You can't rent 30 when you have 2. If it's the first day after 3 weeks of rain, track loader should be more expensive. Now, I know that with sales reps, there's variability in long-term rates and negotiations and stuff like that, but we're not driving customer behavior. When a customer goes to a website or calls on that first cold weekend in fall, if they just saw a calendar and the calendar said it's $250 to rent a log splitter for a day on Saturday because everybody wants one. But if you rent it on Tuesday, it's $50. How much more utilization would you get? How much better customer behavior would you be able to drive with that? And I'm not saying it's with the larger contractors yet, because they need stability, they need negotiated rates. I get all of that. But especially when we're talking about DIY, maybe even some small contractor, DIY gets us everywhere else they go. Why are we not having dynamic pricing for these folks?
Why are we not having it, or what should we do with it?
Sure, either one. Solve both problems.
Okay.
We're going to sit back and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You go right ahead.
We are as guilty as almost every other independent out there, where you set a rate and it just kind of sits there and it never changes. Doesn't matter day of the week, doesn't matter what time of the year, because I got to go in and change everything. I got to go into the computer and I got to make all those changes. 450 categories of product. I don't have to change them for everything to rent this or that for the same price year round, right? But there's a burden to going in and making mass change to rates in most systems. It's just the nature of it. I have all these SKUs, and somebody has to go in and change the numbers on these SKUs, okay? And so I call it rate harvesting, where we need to do what you're describing, but it has to be much more automated, okay? And I think this is a fundamental piece of, we talk about AI, we talk about machine learning, all of this eventually makes its way into systems that are self-pricing, okay, within an algorithm. Nobody is sitting at Delta and changing, 50,000 different seats all the time.
I know that it's possible. When I worked for Ahern Equipment before they sold out and went away, we actually had on our phone an app, and the reps got paid based on the rate, based on the average rate. And you would go in, and the reps were frustrated with it because of exactly what you said, bigger contractors and stuff. But if the rates went up through Roush or through any other piece of software, either internally, or if the utilization went up, the rep could click on it, it would show the utilization, and it did a type of, not quite as detailed as you would like, of dynamic pricing, where you could see, we have one unit, it pushes it over to this category, and that's what the price is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it encouraged, we did it to encourage the sales reps' habits. It wasn't as much to, like you said, which I think is really eloquent and smart, is it controls the customer's habits.
Right.
Is right now we're super busy. You got everybody swinging by on Friday afternoon. It is a nut house as everybody's doing their DIY projects. And then everything comes back and everybody wants to bring it back either Sunday afternoon or Monday morning. And then all of a sudden on Tuesday and Wednesday, you got a yard full of fleet and you're going, man, I need to increase my utilization to increase my return on investment.
Yeah.
So that dynamic pricing really plays an interesting
You're right,
role.
and we do have like floors and ceilings and stuff like that for reps at some of the larger companies. But I think that the gold mine is with the small equipment and the DIY and a digital experience for that stuff. And this might offend you a little bit, but I'm pretty sure, I know it used to, the software that you use actually has the ability to, in an automated way, increase and decrease pricing based on your availability. So if your availability gets to less than 10%, then your rate changes by X percent.
See,
it's a
the
simple
answer
equation.
sitting right in front of you. You didn't even
Now,
turn it on,
don't feel bad
right.
because it's been a number of years since I worked there now. But when I worked there, nobody used it.
Yeah.
It was a great feature. Nobody used.
I mean, I know about that feature.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how it works, and I can't figure out how it works. Okay.
Okay, well, that's fair.
So there are obstacles inside the obstacle.
So if those folks are listening, they can call you and set it up. And you can, yeah, I like it.
So, you both kind of hit on this idea that maybe it's more for DIYers, and we have these, our contractor customers need more stability in their pricing, and it's frustrating to them to see the rates move. But the airlines trained us on how to interact with them in a way that it's most profitable for them. Nobody complains now.
That's fair.
Nobody complains now that 3 weeks out you want to get that flight booked, and nobody complains now that if I book it for tomorrow, I know I'm getting hit.
That's right.
Okay, that's just how it works.
That's fair. And every contractor books it for tomorrow.
Right. Ours do. Ours wake up in the morning and go, I didn't even think I needed a podcast.
You know?
Next thing you know, we're ordering a podcast.
I don't even think, honestly, when you do the daily sales, it's incredible is that, and I'm sure you see it, every one of you has seen this, the one really smart contractor that calls up and says, hey, I need a piece of equipment. I need to order my air compressors for blowout season starting October 15th. And they've got it booked. They want to blow out all their irrigation.
Those are the best ones.
And they're the best ones. And the problem is guess when you look at their order? September 30th. September 30th, you're like, the guy wanted it October 1st? Perfect. We're going to look at it the day before. And people just, and it's funny because the industry has taught us that we literally become crisis managers, and we look at whatever, whatever's on the screen for tomorrow. Nobody's saying, man, you know what we should do? We should really look at getting all those compressors ready. Nope, I've got enough emergencies I need to deal with today.
And just as a really quick aside for everybody who lives in the South or in hot climates, blowout season is when you rent compressors to clean out the irrigation system.
That's right.
Because they're going to freeze.
Yeah.
It never happens in Georgia, and I only learned about it a few years ago. But if you're in the North, you're probably laughing at us because it's super common for you. Every compressor in the area goes out.
That's right.
But we talk